Welcome to Upwards, sponsored by the Microsoft Aspire Experience, where we share stories and insights to help you grow 1% better in your personal and professional life every episode. Here are your hosts for today's episode, Zach Zhu and Jay Lee.
Hello. Welcome to the show. My name is Zach Zhu. I'm a BPM, Business Program Manager on the Technical Community and Leadership team. And today we are going over an absolutely incredible topic with an expert on the topic as well. Jay, please, if you would be willing to introduce.
Thank you so much, Zach. My name is Jay Lee, and I am a Program Manager working within Microsoft Azure. And as Zach said, today we are talking about atomic habits as described by James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. Our guest on the show is Tu Tran, who is a senior consultant at Microsoft. But in addition to his day job, Tu is also a triathlon runner, a business owner, as well as a big family man. We are super excited for you to listen in on this interview and to gather all the advice that Tu can give us. So, enjoy the interview.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode on our very lovely podcast today. And we have an amazing, awesome guest for you guys today as well. Jay, would you mind introducing them?
Yeah, today we have with us Tu Tran. So Tu, thank you for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. One, thank you, and greetings to everyone out there. My name is Tu Tran. I am a Microsoft senior consultant. I've been here for approximately 5 years. Before that, I was a Marine Corps officer. I've done tours in both Afghanistan and Iraq, was an officer for approximately 10 years. I joined right after college. I also am I would say, partner in running a triathlon brand and team, as well as being a family man. I have a adorable 3-year-old son and a lovely wife that I've known for coming up on 10 years now, and will have been married for approximately, I would say, what year is this? Almost 7 years now.
That is amazing. So today we're going to be discussing atomic habits, more specifically, one of the most important atomic habits, time optimization. And I have an expert on the subject matter with us today, Mr. Tu Tran. If you would want to elaborate a little bit more on the definition of time optimization.
My definition of time optimization is being intentional in how you organize your time, being self-aware of when you do things throughout the day and how well you perform certain activities throughout your day. So as an example is my more creative type of thoughts and actions, activities happen either first thing early in the morning or late at night, versus the more detailed things that I need to do, that attention detail and problem solving, that those activities sort of wane throughout my day, just because as my brain power starts becoming less and less.
Just to reiterate your incredible background too, you have background experience in almost everything. It seems like you said, you're a former Marine, currently running a very well-established triathlon business with a pretty large mark in the community. You race in triathlons and Ironmans personally, and you help out with volunteering initiatives around the community. And like you said, you make time for a family somehow. Based on all of this, what atomic habits have you mastered in order to maintain this kind of lifestyle?
I wouldn't necessarily call them atomic habits per se, but maybe some others would. But the habit that I've probably developed or valued the most is how to organize my time, ensuring that each portion of my day is dedicated to something productive. I know that sounds a little probably excessive, but I would say over time it's come that way. I will say that early in my career, I sort of muddled my way trying to figure out how I need to sort of shape my day and my interactions. But I would say organizing my time has been the key point, but also ensuring that I don't necessarily need to solve or do anything grandiose every single day. Sometimes they're just incremental things I need to do throughout my day to sort of push that rock forward for relates to my work, relates to my fitness, relates to my family, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. If you could just go into a little bit more of an elaboration or walk us through a typical day where you have touch points on all of these aspects.
Sure. This is where it might scare most people, but I'll sort of add context to why. I usually wake up around 4:45 in the morning, right? So the reason why I wake up at 4:45 in the morning is because what I've always noticed is that the early part of my day is the only day that I truly get to own. What I mean by that is as the day goes on, is that more often than not, distractions, people, things just happen to come up where someone needs something, there's an ask or something I need to do. And usually no one is asking for anything anywhere from about 5 in the morning till about what I've noticed till about 7, sometimes usually about 8 or 9. But a lot of that time I can dedicate to how I need to shape it. And what I do with that time when I first wake up is wake up, get out of bed and get dressed to go work out. And I know if I don't do that immediately, I will drag myself. So a little bit of self-awareness there of where I will go drag and start moving my body to get warmed up to go work out. I will say at my age, it gets harder if you don't start moving quickly. A lot of you can talk yourself out of it, but that's a big portion of it. So I work out from about 5 o'clock in the morning till about 6:30, 6:45, and then I start cooling down. But what's great about that is I usually multitask with that, which is start prepping my breakfast. I usually value my meals for the end of the day, but during the early part of the day, what I try to do more often than not is sort of speed through my meals, such as making a shake and those sorts of things. At the same time, I will, with my kid, get him ready, spend some time with him in the morning as I'm cooling down, eating my breakfast, getting him ready for the morning, getting him ready for daycare. And then I'll go drop him off, come right back. Of course, squeeze in the sort of the quick hygiene and shower in there, which I would say through the Marine Corps helped us accelerate those things pretty quickly, move pretty fast, but then get started on my workday. But what's great is getting my workday started that early. And this is probably something that could help relate to others, is that no one's still bothering me yet through work. I can catch up on emails, get those sent out, and then I can shut off my email for the rest of the day and focus on meetings and productivity time in the morning as well, where there's no one pinging me for distractions. So, and that's a big portion of how I sort of segment out my day, is knowing full well is like, if I get all my emails out early, I can just focus on productivity work before the meetings start later in that day. And then throughout my day, I, of course, attend the meetings. I know full well that toward the end of the day, I don't work well when it comes to sort of, I would say, more creative type things. What I mean by that is a lot of my work can focus around problem solving or drafting documentation. I know as the day wanes, my mind isn't quite as focused in that area. So I'll ensure I schedule a break or a stop to go work out again. 1, to clear my head, 2, get the blood going again to re-wake me up. And then come back to work, usually for the last bit, to start closing out any last minute things and not start planning for my next day. Around 4:30, I start shutting off, go pick up my kid from daycare, play with him. At the same time, get food ready for dinner. So when my wife comes home, have food ready, put him to bed. And then I focus on sort of triathlon work. And what I mean by that is, what's great about that, I've managed to align social media with the triathlon work. So a lot of my time on my phone or my devices is based upon social media. And what I've been doing is ensuring that all my time on that is productive based. So my interactions on there is helping sort of drive the business more, drive the team more, and those sorts of aspects. And of course, kind of shut down and start decompressing, start shutting off devices, and then spending time with the spouse, having the conversations, figuring out what's going on. Of course, we have our own little internal routines, and that's pretty much it. I know kind of breeze through a lot and a little at the same time, but that's what I have for you.
Sounds like you're 1, extremely good at focusing, and 2, being very well organized in multifaceted multitasking.
I try to be. I would say I didn't get here overnight. There's a lot of stumbles, a lot of self-learning, self-awareness I had to sort of go through.
Yeah, too, you touched on a lot of different aspects of time management and self-awareness there. And one thing that I absolutely love that you said was taking ownership of your time and knowing when you have full ownership of that time. So let's say one situation that people often have is that 10-minute break between meetings, or getting home, logging off of work, and you have an awkward 25, 30 minutes before dinner time starts or something like that. And I know for you, social media is productive work, but for those where social media is kind of that relaxer, that break between meetings, how do you recommend people take back this time if it's that 10 minutes or like 25, 30 minutes?
Well, I would say from the 10 minutes, to answer your question, is the way I would also look at it and address it is, if they're not using it as a distraction, figure out what can you really accomplish in 10 minutes. And that's where you need to sort of frame it as, is that, can I launch off a few emails in that 10 minutes? Can I really turn back to my work? And I would say no. Like, say for me, I'm turning back to documentation or some problem solving. There's nothing I can solve in that 10 minutes, because it's going to take me 5 minutes to refocus. By the time that happens, another meeting has started. So I would say part of that is optimizing and really evaluating, what can I really do in that 10 minutes if it's work related, right? If it's not, then go reset yourself, because that's what you're going to need. Otherwise, you're going to fatigue yourself mentally and emotionally toward the end of the day. So it could be something as simple as doing some stretching, doing some yoga. If you have an in-house gym, which I think most of us do during this age of pandemic, do something to get the blood moving, walk around, get another, cup of coffee, whatever it may be. That's where from the 10 minutes. The 40 minutes, that's a lot of time, especially before dinner time, especially if you don't need to do anything to help prepare for it. And so that can be both decipher between sort of your framework that associate that with work or personal time, right? But personal time still can be productive, kind of relating back to fitness and health and relating it back to that particular piece. That 40 minutes, you can squeeze in a great workout, especially if you plan for it ahead of time by laying out, say, your workout, shoes and your clothing, that may be having that plan, that sort of aspect. So in other words, using, say, potentially that time you had in the morning to lay out all your stuff. So you have, as soon as that time hits, you can turn to your workout clothes and go. And that's where I would say also you can squeeze in that decompression time before that time as well. So if that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. So two, we understand that you have a lot of passions that you're pursuing, as well as balancing time with your family. And one question is, how do you communicate your priorities and your passions to others such that they will respect your way of living and your way of re-energizing yourself?
Sure. There's a couple of factors I would say that help communicate to people to understand sort of my workflow. And I will say it's a give and take. And what I mean by that is, one, people understand how valuable my time is from fitness perspective, but I understand I don't expect other people to feel the same. That's why I do it early and I associate it with that early. But when it comes to the other things, right, and that we're generally speaking, is that I would say at this point in my career, since I have the resident knowledge and I'm the go-to person, I have the ability to dictate sort of what it is. But of course, for people who are listening, how do I do that first starting out? Well, I would say as a piece of advice is, once you start becoming that subject matter expert, that person in that driver's seat versus, say, the passenger seat, you can able to communicate and drive that. And people will follow it because they're basically seeking your input, your advice. So therefore they kind of have to sort of abide by it to a degree, right? Cater to you because they need something from you. The other way around, it's a sort of a delicate dance that you need to have with it. But a lot of times, if you provide the context and clarity as to why, especially here at Microsoft, people will have that level of empathy to adopt to it, as long as it's still within a relative sort of meaningful, and I would say it's not sort of way off base to say, as an example, I'm not going to say, hey, 1 to 3, no meetings because I'm doing my own thing. It's a little unreasonable, right? Because that's usually kind of prime time for people to meet and talk and discuss things that are happening. But what I was trying to say with that is, but if you say, hey, during this time, it's sort of negotiation, like I need time because this is happening in my life, such as some people say, I have my kid who wakes up from their nap, I have to dedicate some time to him or her for attention. Or, hey, I need this a little bit of time here for my own personal resetting and wellness. If I'm willing to, budge on it every so often, but I like to keep this time carved out for myself, as an example, is a way to help provide that clarity and context for people to sort of like, oh, okay, I understand that. I can respect that. And I will be aware of that. Right. And so communicate that expectation up front means a lot to people. Like, oh, and they'll do their best to meet you there, meet you in the middle, or meet you all the way, if that helps provide that answer. And of course, the classic one is just throw a calendar block on your calendar, so they just can't magically throw it on there. But realistically is communicate and provide context up front and throughout the entire time of a relationship. And you would be surprised how often and how empathetic people will be to that.
Our listeners here may have less than 5 years of experience in the workforce after graduating college. So how long do you think it takes for people to figure out what to do with their time?
I would say it's a lifelong discipline because it's going to change on life circumstances. So for me, I balance it this way because I have a family now. And I would assume most people may not have the same level of responsibilities that they do earlier in their career. If they do, then of course, what I've just said is directly applicable. But I would say what's great about for early career individuals is this is their time to figure that out, right? And they don't necessarily need to use all that time necessarily for direct productivity. So as an example is as someone's getting off of work who may be unattached and have a lot of responsibilities, you can still use that time productive to go, I would say not goof off, but go out and figure out what is valuable to you. And that's still productive time. And what I mean by that is just because I am not necessarily working or I'm not making like sort of measurable progress, it doesn't mean it's not productive. Because with that time off, especially people early in their career, you're going to figure out what else can I do now that I'm not tied with homework. I don't need to turn to work to do something. What is my next passion, right? Is it going to be taking care of my health, right? Go use that time to now combine, just develop a routine, right? To go out, cater to your health, fitness routines, that may be it. Go figure out if they need to go volunteer in the community, like something that gives them that sort of enrichment that maybe work may not be completely fulfilling. And that is still productive, but carving out that time, being intentional and doing so is what I would tell people to do. Yes, you can easily sit back and watch the latest, Disney series, especially the great Marvel series that are out there or whatever it may be. But what I would look at is really exploring what you do and don't like, what your passions may be, and exploring those, what some ideas are, or even being social. So funny enough, even being social is productive because we're naturally social creatures and it's going to enrich us. And so developing those habits of ensuring that we address sort of that pyramid of need of like both, the emotional, the psychological, those spiritual needs, of carving out time to address those after work.
Yeah, totally. Because for a lot of people out there, I can see after you graduate college, you have a full-time job, but some people are involved in tons of activities in college. And I hate this word, but people want to search for a quote unquote side gig. So, for example, for you, maybe people would be thinking your triathlon business could be that side gig, but it's really inspirational to hear you say hanging out with friends, volunteering for the community, even just taking care of yourself are productive activities that you can partake in and can indulge in at any time. But going back to that side gig mentality, let's say our listeners here would like to pursue something like that. During your time at Microsoft, what are some of the intriguing activities you've heard of people doing? So triathlon for you, or do people, run a skydiving business on the side as well?
I would say there's a few things. So to answer your question, but to come back to it in a different way. But first things I've seen, just sort of listing it off there, real estate, for one, both sort of commercial real estate and, sort of the regular real estate that we see with home buying. I've seen other individuals run, I would say, even smaller sort of, not gonna say consulting, but like sort of coaching businesses of helping other sort of high schoolers, college individuals out. That may be it as well. I wouldn't necessarily say some people are turning back to sort of like from other service industries perspective, like going to become a server again, but it's those other professional things that have maybe put on their mind that they could easily time manage and shape their own schedule. It's almost like a degree of entrepreneurship that they're able to do. But what I prefaced before is coming back to it is you can definitely search for a true side gig. But what I would say is go pursue your passions first. And I know that seems doesn't sound like it's going to be very money making, right? How am I supposed to monetize that? When I got into triathlon years ago, I never looked at it to make money. But what it did was I pursued it with the same level of passion and intensity that I would do with anything else. And what I mean by that is, as an example, I got involved with the community. I showed up to the local businesses because they had local meetups for either running or swimming or going biking together, meeting the various people in the community, business owners, people in industry. By pure observation, interaction, and building my relationships, I got to know about it. I'm like, cool, I'd like to know how things work. years later, we're talking like 5 to 7 years later, an opportunity finally came up and I wasn't looking for it going, hey, we need someone to do X, Y, and Z thing in triathlon. And I'm like, well, I'm familiar with all of that. How about let me give this a shot? And naturally that tied into it because the opportunity came up because I had all these different experiences that I grew from pursuing a passion, right? The opportunities will be there. What's difficult, as we've seen from especially entry level college hires, is that there isn't necessarily a lot of experience they have for side gigs or jobs that are out there currently. But if you pursue things that are passionate to you, there's a natural industry that you're tied into. Just gain experience from, say, the consumer perspective, but get involved in seeing how things work and how those interactions go. Build those relationships because in due time, there will be a need for you as long as you can search for it. And you'll have that experience by virtue of being present, just by showing up. So really something that we've always said in sort of endurance sports is just show up, right? Every day, bring you and just show up. So you don't know what's going to be presented to you, when it's going to be presented to you. So kind of putting a bow on the answer is go pursue your passions. Don't necessarily look out to monetize it, but the more you get to know about it, in-depth knowledge, having that sort of that intellectual property that you get to develop, I guarantee you'll be able to monetize it later as your experience grows.
So let's say you're in the perspective of early in career people, first year in the job, and you're really focused on work and you're not really sure what your passions are, or even if you do have a passion at all. How do you recommend people to kind of go out and find that passion?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So just to restate the question is, how does a new hire figure out their passion? Really, the best way to do it, I think, is go hang out with your other hires because they're going to have passions they're going to introduce you to. Every single one of them has something. They already have their pre-existing networks, ways and means and methods about it. So instead of you trying to go off on your own and recreating the wheel, leverage your relationships because one, they're going to introduce you with the same level of passion that you would in the reverse. So they're going to give you the best possible experience introducing you to it and exploring that with him or her. That's what I would say is automatically leverage your pre-existing networks already that have that. And that would be my first kind of full-blown step that's there as it relates to sort of exploring a new passion. Because even if that doesn't turn out to be something, you're going to be exposed to many other things, either specific to their passion, or you'll get to learn about yourself in that process.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So we're moving down the train of this perspective. They found their passion. They're like, wow, this is amazing. I want to spend more of my time on it. So what are some of the most important habits in regards to time optimization that early in career people need to focus on in order to really give their passion the time that it deserves to recharge themselves? So
let's make sure I understand the question correctly. So you're asking what skills or what things in general does someone need to do to be able to ensure this is successful?
Pretty much. Yeah. Just what habits are the most important in developing time affluency?
So I would say maybe necessarily directly related to time affluency, right? But more of the habit that needs to be created is your habit of thought. And what I mean by that is thoughts turn into emotions, which then turn into sort of actions. And what I mean by that is what happens a lot of times for people learning to time manage can be very overwhelming. They start convincing themselves, thinking like, I can't do this, there's a lot. And that turns into an emotional response. That emotional response turns into things such as like anxiety or just overwhelmness. And that just becomes sort of a snowball effect. So my first and foremost to even get before we start developing a sharply refined skill, such as time management, is to ensure your habit of thought is there. That's being positive. I know it seems very obvious, but it's also being very important because so often we self-talk ourselves out of something, or not even just do that either directly, but as I mentioned is we'll just say like, oh, I don't have enough time for this. Let me forget about this. I can't do this. And that emotion becomes it starts now emanating throughout your mindset and your thought process of where you're thinking, okay, well, what's the next step beyond that? Then you're not doing those things anymore. So having that positive thoughts and language to yourself to reaffirm that you can do these things, that you are doing these things, right? I can give you specific techniques, but I don't think that's going to be important necessarily for this particular conversation, but we have to find it in ourselves to be aware of the thoughts that we're having of when we take on these new challenges, these new things, because a lot of change is happening for an aspire hire because they're still thinking, I still have a lot to learn. I should still focus on my work. I'm still learning. I'm still ramping. These customers want these things. And you're talking yourself saying it's too difficult to take on something else. And now you're just completely forgetting about it. And that's not becoming a habit anymore. Your habit of thought is, and your habit of not doing is becoming a habit.
Wow. That's a great point because in society, we always talk about generating positive habits and trying to maintain those beneficial aspects of life, but it really all stems from a thought process. So I appreciate you for mentioning that for our listeners.
Yeah, it really makes me want to go back and do some meditation and start journaling and think about what positive aspects in my life and in my thoughts can I capitalize on moving on.
Good old mindfulness.
Yeah.
I would say, just to kind of throw that back at you, Jay, is when you look at your journal, go look at your thoughts that you wrote down, seeing how they can potentially are changing over time, seeing how they were. So you can probably potentially see a pattern either one way or another, which way your thoughts are leaning. So I think journaling is a great way to sort of document that in what we're thinking, when we're thinking it, and sort of being reflective on it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
So based off of all of the time optimization advice that you've given us so far, obviously achieving atomic habits and that ultimate mastery of time optimization is the end goal. And it's a pretty arduous process to get to any sort of meaningful goal. What kind of advice or guidance do you have on early in career folk really going forward with this process of achieving time optimization and these atomic habits?
The number one is the time optimization. Two is the self-awareness. I would say maybe not action items, but I would say guidance, right? Or at least be aware of. I would want to add is the sort of, there's two components of it. One piece is fall in love with the process of developing your habits and living your habits, right? Don't be so encompassed with finding the result right away. The reason why I say that is a lot of times we are so focused on instant gratification, such as when you do health, you're eating for your health or your fitness, you expect, oh, I'm eating healthy today, I should lose 5 pounds tomorrow. Like, that's not the way it works. It's you do this over time and you get to that target fitness, that target body composition. But in order to make that habit solidified, you need to fall in love with the fact that I get to go outside and go run, breathe in the fresh air. I have this time to myself. I like the way it makes me feel. So you're falling in love with that process, which then builds that habit to be solidified. And related to that piece, kind of mentioned it before, is fall in love with delayed gratification. Embrace that. Right? Don't be so focused on the instant gratification because it feels more meaningful when you put all these habits together to achieve that goal or end result. And when you finally get there, it feels even more amazing, that instant gratification, because that hard work, you've put in there, and that becomes further solidifying that in perpetuity going forward.
Well, what are some things that listeners can do immediately today after listening to this conversation?
I would say, in context of this conversation and the things that were brought up, if you don't have a passion, the thing I would definitely focus on first is your health and fitness. Of course, I say that because of the triathlon background and those sorts of things, but you will find that if you take care of that now, it becomes easier later. But two, your capacity to take on more physically will help you out mentally and emotionally. The reason why I say that is if you take care of it now, if you don't have a passion later on, when you do start taking on more, and if you've been taking care of your health and fitness, you will find you will have the energy and capacity to take on more. So my first and foremost is especially also that since we are leaving the active life of, say, college days and going into the workforce, this is sort of an inflection point of where our fitness as adults starts going one way or the other. So my emphasis is definitely focus on developing time, carving out that time for your health and fitness and developing those habits, because what you'll find is no one can disagree that the passion and developing habits around good fitness and health are negative. It's actually an absolutely positive thing, but you will glean from that the habits that you'll need to develop your other habits, those other atomic habits, those other passions you need to develop. It becomes a great way to start developing that and learning about yourself by making that a priority.
Very well said. Perfect wrap up. So for listeners out there, think about your passions, think about your time, and think about what you can do right now to invest in yourself. Is that right?
Absolutely. Like the recap. Thank you.
You're always in control, and it's your opportunity to be in the driver's seat. That was an awesome conversation, too. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. And thank you for the time.
Wow, Zach, that was a fantastic interview with two that we just had. It's a Monday that we're recording this, and I would like to say that kind of really inspired me to go back and look at my habits and look at my passions and think of how can I optimize my time.
Oh, no, for sure. I feel you on a spiritual level. I really feel like I got to do a huge reevaluation myself at this point. But honestly, I feel like too really comforted, not only myself, but anybody who is trying to go through this process in the first place, just because it really all does start with our thought process, and we're fully in control of what we want and what we need. And sometimes I feel like we kind of overcomplicate this entire process of developing beneficial habits. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. And a lot of that goes into what people are passionate about, just like Tu said. And my biggest takeaway is to really find that passion that I want to pursue that's lifelong, and to put my all into it and then see what comes out of it, whether that is health or fitness related or personal related or even professional activities related too. And I really want to look back on these habits and think about how can I own my time such that these habits become a big part of my life.
I really, really like what you said about owning your time and just making time for those passions, and the fact that Tu also kind of reframed the entire aspect of what time is really important to us, because coming from college, we're all extremely high achievers here at Microsoft. We're focused on, making the customer satisfied, hitting our numbers, et cetera, anything that's related to achieving a very strong goal. And ultimately, one of the most important aspects of Atomic Habits is making sure that you're living a healthy and happy life. And the fact that Tu said, like, we can socialize, we can go on walks, we can do anything that really helps refill and recharge ourselves as human beings is a productive activity and ultimately leads to developing atomic habits. So I think that's just phenomenal to hear from a senior consultant, that taking care of yourself really should be as equally important as reaching your customer goals.
Yeah, and that's totally different from a college mindset in a way, where sometimes you give it your all, pull an all-nighter to study for a test, and then you have summer break, winter break to relax. And that really doesn't happen in the working world, where it is constant. It is every single day, 9 to 5. You can take your time as needed. You can take vacation as needed, but you really need to think about how do you manage your time and how can you yourself be recharged so you don't burn out. I think burning out is what people experience, especially in the pandemic world, where we can't really see people live. We can't really hang out as much as we want to. And it really is something to reflect on and think of, what activities can we do to recharge and who gives us energy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that being said, to our listeners out there, just make sure you're taking time for yourself, you're refilling your cup, you're staying recharged and avoiding burnout. So that was Time Optimization and Atomic Habits with Tu Tran. Thank you guys so much for listening, and hopefully you got as much out of it as we did.
Thanks for listening to Upwards. Be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and leave us a review. Learn more about the Microsoft Aspire experience at aka.ms/Microsoft Aspire experience. We'll catch you next time on Upwards.